And this episode is why high achievers self-abandon and how to stop. This one is near and dear to my heart because not only do I coach people to not self-abandon by putting tools into place, and I'm going to give you some tips today, but I also have suffered over the years with a lot of self-abandonment, not realizing really what it was because I have been praised for the positive side of self-abandonment. So first, I'm going to go through what self-abandonment is, then how we as high achieving women do this to ourselves, some negative effects of that, and then I'm going to share with you some tips on how to not self-abandon. And I'm going to give some examples that it's kind of hard for me to share, and I've shared with some people close to me because I thought I was over this. I thought I was so done with self-abandonment until I realized that there are some really tricky ways that we can self-abandon. And it's because we're prioritizing other important things in our lives. And anyway, this was a shocker to me. I'm going to share it with you. So, first of all, what is self abandonment? Really, it is ignoring your own emotional, mental, physical needs to gain either approval from others, meet expectations of others, or avoid conflict. For me, as this kind of elevates, and I've become more confident and more outspoken and felt permission to do that, what I realized, it wasn't necessarily to gain approval. It just wasn't really, I didn't want to rock the boat. And maybe you've been there too. And so maybe you're asked to do things and you say yes to the request because it's a fair request. But the problem is, this is where the next kind of level comes in. Normally you maybe could say yes, or it would be natural or good for you to do this because it's your skill or you volunteered before. But at this point, you're exhausted. Or there are times when you silence your opinions because you don't want to upset others. And so it's like you're choosing to keep the peace, but then you're silencing your own opinions and you're choosing kind of a good path. However, you're self-abandoning, which causes a lot of harm to yourself. And I'm going to talk about how the more we self-abandon, or this is really important to know, the more we self-abandon, it becomes a really big habit over time. And not only are we teaching ourselves that we self-abandon, that's just who we are, but we're teaching others that we will self-abandon. And so the more they push us and the more they ask and the more they pressure, then the more likely they're going to get the result that they're looking for. And this is especially if you've been raised as a people pleaser. Any people pleasers out there? Yeah. Okay, so how do high achieving women self-abandon? Well, we are, as high achievers, we're super driven. And so we're more prone to this because of things like, as I said, people pleasing, but also perfectionism, right? So we want things to be perfect. And so we're just going to keep pushing and keep going, which means we'll self-abandon in order to have it be perfect. So we'll not sleep in order to put more time in. We won't maybe take some time away for ourselves. We'll keep working. We won't rest. We won't have pleasure in our lives because we're looking for that perfect outcome. In the people pleasing, we're going to put other people's agendas before our own. And that also comes in the fact that we're probably leaders and we are caring for others and we are responsible for a group or responsible for the family. And therefore, we put other people's agendas, other people's needs before our own, even though we know that we technically are supposed to put the oxygen mask on ourselves before helping others. It's just so hard to do because it seems like we can hold a lot of responsibility and like everyone needs us to do all the time, right? Another reason is fear of failure. So by kind of admitting defeat or by taking a kind of a more gentle or gracious to yourself approach, maybe we won't get there. Maybe we won't have that success. And so that fear can come up as well. And a lot of times we're proving our worth because of that external validation and our worth coming from the things we do, achieve, other people's belief in us, other people's opinions of us, then that proving causes us to push through, even though we don't want to do something or don't have the energy to do something. And so we we start to overwork, right? And when we overwork and overwork and overwork, we get into that place of exhaustion and we take on too many responsibilities, or we start neglecting our personal health for our professional success, right? How many times have you had a project or a busy time and you just didn't really eat proper meals, or if you were eating meals, you were eating them on the go, or they were terrible meals? How many times have you even just worked through lunch? Yeah, so you're eating, but you're working at the same time. How many times have you given up sleep, personal uh, events, enjoyments, hobbies for that professional success? Probably, I've been guilty of that for sure. And so a lot of times we'll do that, right? I hear so many times stories from high achieving women who have missed out on important things in their lives, in their families and loved ones' lives for that pushing for the result, right? And then the thing is, society backs that up. There are cultural pressures as well. So, being that I am uh, Caucasian, my parents are British. There's not as many cultural pressures on me. I'm quite privileged, and I will admit that. But there are many cultures where you have to honor your family. You have to give up your your goals, your desires, your education in some cultures for the care of your family members. When you have to do what your partner says or your parents say or whatever it may be. And so I'm going to share just an example of some examples of how I used to be, and then how I became, and then how I got kind of tricked into self-abandoning recently. So a lot of times, going into conventions, and I'm going to do this all around conventions, going to conventions or conferences or personal or professional development workshops. Many times I would go, and in the main rooms or in the main trainings, what I would do is I would notice that other people were struggling. And so rather than me focusing on my work, because I kind of caught on and I was doing well, or I was kind of like getting ahead in my work, I would actually start focusing on supporting other people in the workshop. And what I decided to do over time was I stopped that, because it meant that at the end of this course, program, whatever it may be, I wouldn't be where I needed to be. So then I would need to put some extra time in afterwards to get where I needed to be, because I was supporting other people in the room. But that wasn't my job. That was the organizer's job, the teacher's job, the coach's job, whoever, the trainer's job, to care for these people. And I'm not saying don't care for others, right? But I was giving so much of myself and so much of my understanding and my knowledge to others that I ended up being behind. And I ended up not being able to get the time with the teacher, the coach, whoever it was, myself, because I was busy helping other people rather than asking my own questions and seeing how I could take my results further. Now, that's main sessions, that's also programs and trainings. But what about going to conventions with my peers where there were breakout sessions? Anytime that there was a breakout session that a friend of mine was in, or even an acquaintance, I would show up to their workshop, even if their topic was something that I didn't need. Now, why was I doing that? Why was I self-abandoning my desire to go to a different workshop? Because I felt that responsibility to support them. And sometimes I still do that, and that's important to me. However, every single breakout session, I was like, who do I know? And I should go sit front row and, support them, clap for them, be there for them. And that meant I was self-abandoning my own desire of where I needed to be in order to get myself further ahead towards my personal and professional goals. Again, these are all great things to do, but in moderation. But I was like full on doing that. Also, if I was in the hallway and you're rushing between getting a drink or going to the bathroom and getting back in the main room or getting into your breakout room for a session, and I'd be chatting with people. and I wouldn't stop the chat. They didn't care about what was happening in the room, but I would self-abandon and not be like, I'm sorry, like, great chatting with you, but I want to go and hear the next keynoter, or I want to jump into that session. So I'd be missing breakout sessions. I'd be missing main stage speakers. I'd be missing activities because I felt bad telling someone that I wasn't going to listen to them anymore or that I was going to stop the conversation. And if you're like, oh, Diane, you shouldn't have done that. Hey, I get it. I get it. And we're not here to judge, right? I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to just show you the progression of how far I've come. And yet, I'm going to show you how I still self-abandon. So I was saying yes to chats and missing sessions. Or, you know, when sometimes you need a break, like you've been on all day, you're peopled and education out. And there are times when either there is a break, or you choose to take a break and not be in a session and go and have some alone time. And I need that to recharge. I am an extrovert to some degree, but the amount of noise, the amount of connection making, the amount of time on, I need a break. I totally need a break from chatting with people and from all the education. I need a break. And also, I'm an empath, and so I can feel the emotions of others. And so, oh my goodness, when there are some activities where people are having shifts and breakthroughs, oh, I feel it deeply. And when I'm a participant rather than the actual coach, it's very different. And so, what I would do is I would choose again to chat with people or support people rather than go and take some time away for myself that I needed. And that was so hard. And so I know now I know not to do that. And I don't do that anymore. The odd time I might, because of like emergency or really important, I might give someone some time, but then I make sure that I have my own time away. So the last thing that I would do with conventions before is it'd be like, okay, convention ends, let's say at 5, and then I'd make my way straight to the airport and I'd race home because my family needs me and I need to be back right away. And so instead, now I always arrive a day early so things are chill and I can kind of get in the right headspace. And I always leave a day later so that I have some time to just some downtime. And the downtime could be literally sitting at the pool, going to the gym, going for a walk, sleeping in, that sort of chill time. Or it could be me sitting with all these new ideas, the new learning, and be able to start putting things in place or go through my notes, whatever it may be, but I always take time before and after. Let me talk about the negative effects of self-abandonment, and then I'm going to share with you the way I did self-abandon myself recently, the the kind of immediate impacts of that, and then the later impacts um, that I felt, and how it really kind of rocked me. So here goes. Let me talk about the negative effects. Okay. The first one is it takes an emotional toll when you're self-abandoning. And this could be self-abandoning once, it could be self-abandoning many times, it could be just a life of general self-abandonment. This can give you chronic stress because you're not having the downtime. You're not listening to your needs. You're not getting what you need to nourish you and support you. So chronic stress, anxiety, burnout, and these are big ones. Feelings of emptiness or resentment. Feelings of emptiness or resentment. And when I think of emptiness, I also think of depression. And then let's just kind of dive off of that. If you're feeling any of that, you are unable to achieve what you want to achieve. You are unable to be going for the things you want to go for, to believe in yourself, to have confidence. This is going to start to erode so many foundational pieces of you, and you don't want that to happen. Next is physical effects. So things like fatigue, right? Exhaustion. You're going to have sleep problems because you're thinking about these things, or you don't get enough time to sleep, and other health issues that come from neglecting self-care. So you might get sick more often. You might not be healthy because you're not moving your body. and you're not doing the things that you need to nourish yourself, if you're not eating properly, then you're not getting the right amount of energy. And there's so many different things, high blood pressure, having a cortisol spike. This can lead to so many other things, like diabetes. And like we can go on and on and on. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to go into it, but there are so many other, had a client's retinas detach. There's so many things physically that can happen to you from self-abandoning, which is really sad. Also, in relationships, when you're consistently self-abandoning, as I said before, it can help kind of hurt you in two ways. One, you self-abandon for others people's needs, and then they take advantage of you, and then there's resentment, and that's not a positive relationship. It can also lead to strained relationships because those that you are good with, they're going to get ticked that you keep self-abandoning for other people, that you keep choosing other people over them, or there's like a double standard and a loss of authenticity in who you are in those relationships. If you become a yes person or you don't speak up for yourself, it's really sad. I was at an event last night and kind of saw that in one of the wives. Her husband was saying all this like ridiculous stuff and getting drunk and being like all macho around his friends and everything. And I could just see that she had just given up saying things, and so she had definitely lost her authenticity in that. And then we even get into personal identity, right? So when you self-abandon, you're telling yourself you're not worth listening to your own needs, your own wants. You aren't allowed to speak up to what is true for you, what you need to be able to put boundaries on things. And so it's really eroding your self-esteem. That's huge for confidence, right? And it's going to leave you disconnected to your true self because your true self's going to be like, well, anytime I speak up, I'm not listened to. Anytime something comes up, my ability to listen to the self-awareness that's coming up. So eventually those voices, the self-awareness, the intuition, they start to just quiet down because it's like, why bother? Why bother? This my owner, myself, I'm not even listening to myself. So why would I bother speaking up, right? Okay. So let me share a little bit my story about this. So recently I was at a convention and my family was there, and the last time I had my family there, it was horrible. It was so horrible, and I ended up having to care for them more than myself. And so for this trip, I was like, that's not happening. And so a lot of boundaries were set and a lot of communication happened and things were better. But it's still intense to be in a room with your family, to make sure that they're where they need to be, to have their chaos of their stuff in the room when you come back from convention. And so all of that was there, but I had booked 2 days to myself afterwards to kind of get over all of that and to be in a good space. But you see, sometimes when our values are present and we want to honor our values, it might lead to self-abandonment. And this is the trickiest thing that happened to me and the hardest lesson that I had to learn. So, I had there was someone who, from some kind of just logistical mistake, they didn't have a place to stay. And they tried to get themselves a place to stay, and there was no room at the inn, basically. There was no place for them to stay. And so they decided that they would just like sleep in a lounge chair by the pool. And me and my value of caring for others, my value of like around safety and belonging and all these other values, I felt like they can't be on their own. They can't just be sleeping outside. But I also know I need my space. I was way up. I was so overwhelmed by everything that I needed my space, and I was so looking forward to a quiet night in my room after the big event, and then the next morning waking up whenever my body was ready to wake me up. And so at first I tried to honor myself and not self-abandon because there was a whole day, right? I was like, oh, well, that's too bad, but my family was just in the room and like they were sleeping in the bed and blah blah blah. So I use that as an excuse because my second bed did have my kids in it for a week or 10 days or whatever it was. And then as the night went on, I realized they still didn't, no one stepped forward to give them a spot in their room. No one did that. And I thought, I can't stand by and have them not have a space. And so rather than me kind of asking around on their behalf or pushing them to, or just frankly ignoring them, there were so many people that just ignored them. And I wish I could be that person. I just couldn't. I just couldn't. But I knew I was teetering on this place of like, I'm giving up what I need in order to honor them and to honor my value. And so will I be okay? And I knew I couldn't, I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep knowing that they would be outside. Like I could not live with myself. And so close to the end of the night, I said, hey, you can stay in my room. And I didn't set some really clear boundaries because there were things shared with me that I thought would honor that. And this is not me bad mouthing them at all. I just didn't realize how sensitive I was at that time and what I really needed. And so by having them in my room when they got up at 4:30 in the morning and turned the light on and then went to the airport and all that stuff, I did not have a good sleep. I was exhausted. I was probably on like the edge of burnout and I was highly emotional. And I realized that afterwards that I did not have the emotional capacity and the emotional bandwidth, mental bandwidth to deal with that. And it's not like they were a horrible person. They weren't. They were just sleeping there. But it was the disruption to my sleep. It was the having someone in my space that caused me to feel later some of the negative effects, especially the one around like just knowing that I self-abandoned and that feeling of resentment and that feeling of ickiness to myself that I did that to myself. So I've learned a lesson. It's really hard. This is the tricky spot though, when values are brought in that because of your value, you're willing to self-abandon to do something to honor the value. And so it was very interesting to me. So let's talk about how to stop self-abandonment. And these are all the things that I do normally to not self-abandon, the things I go through with my clients to help them as well. So first thing is set some boundaries. You can gracefully say no to people. You can protect your time and energy. You can set some boundaries around how things will be. And that's probably what I should have done here. Really set some super clear boundaries. And that's what I said previously. The next is to reconnect with yourself. Do things like journaling, meditation, um, take alone time for yourself so that you know what you need and you desire. I had to talk to a couple friends about this afterwards to just understand like what happened. And then I was like, oh shoot, what happened and why I feel so bad is because I self-abandoned. I didn't listen to what I really needed. And that kind of hurt. And so the next day I had to like super honor that boundary so that I could have one night to recoup. So next is to just practice some self-compassion. If you do end up self-abandoning, don't criticize yourself. Just give yourself some kindness. I had to do that in this case. Just like you would, to a loved one, someone you care about, what would you say to them in these cases? And then come up with a plan for the next time. Also, you need to prioritize self-care. It needs to be in your schedule. You have to put me time in there. I love honoring the Sabbath. Sunday is my day. I get to do kind of things I want. Oftentimes it's sunny. I go for a walk. I go to church. I do some journaling. I do my devotional. Like, I don't know, maybe I cook. I do the things I want. That's me time. Get really good too in prioritizing self-care by asking for help from others so that you do have time. It doesn't have to all be you. You are not the martyr of everyone around you, right? So delegate tasks including mental load tasks, decision-making tasks. And the last thing is, I encourage you to challenge your perfectionism. If you feel like you're super driven and you like things done a certain way, like what is that costing you? You can let go of perfectionism. It will help you to get more done quickly, and not burn you out in the process, right? You don't have to sacrifice who you are and your well-being to have things be perfect. Trust me, if you feel like you suffering from perfectionism, your 10, your 8 is probably other people's 10, right? Or your 6 is someone else's 10 and your 8 is someone else's 15 out of 10. So just be thinking about that. So will you, if you're good at not self-abandoning, will you never face a time when you self-abandon? You probably do. You might not be calling it self-abandonment, but just take a look. Take a look at your life and moments and situations and ask yourself, am I self-abandoning for someone else? Am I giving up something that I want to do or what I need, something I want for someone else? Am I not saying no because of the external validation and I don't want to look bad in front of others? That's why I went to people's workshops when it wasn't even my topic that I wanted, because I wanted to seem like I was a good friend or a good supporter. When then I learned later, so many people never, so many of their friends never came, that I was like, why am I doing this? And, you get to decide how to live a life that is both successful and satisfying. We want to have both. Not just one, not just success. We want to be satisfied. And so you deserve to be prioritized in your own life. You deserve to be on your list of priorities. And I'm not saying that everything needs to change today, but what if you just made one small change this week? That would lead eventually to big transformations, right? 1%, 1%, 1%, to the point where you look at your life and you say, I'm not self-abandoning anymore. That's what I want for you. Please hit subscribe, share this with a friend. And, the Breakthrough 2025, this is still the place for you. I can tell you, I will never let you self-abandon in those sessions. When we are going to go through your breakthrough blueprint, that blueprint is going to keep you on task. There are tools in there that will not allow you to self-abandon. If a group program is not for you, though there are many benefits, having like-minded people, learning from other people's blueprints, coaching other people. If one-on-one is more for you and you'd like support with self-abandonment or to have this be your breakthrough year, then reach out, Diane at DianeRolston.com, and the Breakthrough 2025, the link for that will be in the chat. Until next time, everyone, stay dynamic. Bye.